All right. Okay, so for the first time ever, I'm gonna try actually recording the meetup now that I know how it works. um, yeah, who we got? Some amount of people. Let's say somewhere for others. Okay, cool. I just put the link in the PHP Australia Slack, so hopefully people will join as we go along. Yeah, we're just gonna make a quick start. Oh dear, classic. Okay, try again. All right, I think we're good. Okay, yeah, take your seats. So yeah, once again, for the late arrivals, toilets are just at the back door on the right. Grab some beer, grab some pizza, grab some soft drinks, grab some popcorn. Welcome to the October edition of the meetup. So, community announcements. So we have Laracon AU coming up in 3 weeks. So it's the first time, actually the first time the Laracon has been held in a city other than Sydney. Which is quite exciting because it's, as I mentioned last time, not financial advice, but I'm pretty sure it's tax deductible to fly and stay, accommodate yourself in Brisbane for this lovely conference, as well as the conference tickets itself. So at the time I was putting these slides together, which is maybe like 2 days ago, there were still 7 early bird tickets left. I don't know if that's still the case, but for sure you can have a look. Just go to Laracon AU or Google Laracon AU. Yeah, if you love networking, you're gonna love it. There's 2 days, but there's actually 4 networking events. So you have twice the networking events of the days of talks, which is amazing. 5 early birds left, right? So there we go, 5 early birds left. Get those early birds. Otherwise, it's like I think $100 more, or maybe 150 after that. And there's not that many tickets. I think Jay was saying there's 20 tickets after the early bird, something like that, maybe if that. So the late tickets, there's not a lot of them. They're quite expensive. So if you're interested at all, have a think about it tonight. Book it tonight. Maybe after a few beers, that'll encourage you to spend your money a little bit more. Yeah, so we have 4 events down. This is the 4th event for the year, which is great. Probably one more, probably last week of November, maybe. The only issue is our whole company's kind of away in Thailand in the 3rd week of November, so I'm just a bit unsure if I should do this event the last week of November or wait one more week, but anyway, we'll see. Yeah, the other announcement is, I think if you were here last meetup, you would have seen me mention that the front-enders meetup. I've been trying to contact the organizers and kind of hassle them to organize an event because it hasn't happened in like a year and a half or something like that. So yes, finally, after talking to them, we've managed to organize for them to have it here. So apparently they had issues with venues pulling out. So I don't know about that, but anyway, I said for sure you can host it here, 0 issues. So that means the front-enders meetup is back. If you're not a member of this meetup group, you can scan this convenient QR code right here, or you can just look it up on meetup.com. It's called Front-Enders Sydney or something like that. It's basically encompassing all the front-end frameworks. So you've got your Angular, you've got React, of course, Vue.js, and I don't know, anything else. Could be anything front-end related. And we're going to have it right here in this very office on the 30th of October, which is, I think, a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, have a look at that. Feel free to come here. There will be, again, beer and pizza. And what else? Laracon EU has been announced and the RFP is out. Is anybody thinking of going or doing a talk there? Not really, okay. Well, I think I'll probably be going to there. Yeah, any other announcements from the community before I continue? No. All right, so thank you to the sponsors. As you may not know, so we have a new sponsor, CoTalent, allowing us to have an extra event this year. And hopefully if the sponsorship goes well, if the deal goes well, they'll continue to sponsor us into next year and actually even maybe for more events, which is great. Unfortunately, Aaron and Rob, they couldn't be here tonight, so I think one of them is sick, the other has a different event on. So, okay, if you're in the market for any kind of job, I've conveniently left these QR codes on the 2 columns here. So I think that's Rob's LinkedIn profile. So give him a shout if you're in the market for a job. They're really good guys, and yeah, they're very helpful. I think last time they were talking to quite a lot of people. And yeah, of course, Cover Genius, my company. Thanks for the event space, beer and pizza tonight. Yeah, as always, very appreciated. Yeah, actually, forgot to mention. So we're probably going to be hiring a lot next year. Not now, but we do have one PHP job opening as of today. As of just today, I found out. So if somebody here is, or you know, like a senior full stack engineer, obviously there's more focus on PHP. Obviously it's Laravel, but if you're in the market for a job or you know somebody that is, yeah, please let me know. That job it might not be on our website, but for sure it is there. It's not like a fake job. So just speak to me during the break. Yeah, and as always, call for speakers. So if you're interested in doing a talk, yeah, a lot of these talks are confirmed like in the last month or whatnot, which is pretty cool. But if you're interested to do a talk, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever, yeah, give me a shout. Join the PHP Australia Slack as well. All right. So yeah, next meetup, look out for that. I'll post it on the meetup website shortly, probably after today. So wait a minute. There's one slide. The schedule slide. Did this come up? I don't know. I might have missed it. Okay. So schedule for tonight. We have 3 talks. Not in this order, unfortunately. We're going to give Mith a little bit more time to work on his presentation. But we're going to have these 3 talks. They're all quite short. They're all about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. So we're just going to go boom, boom, boom. We're going to have like a really quick break in between each talk. You know, enough break for you to get a beer, go to the toilet, something like that. But just a really quick 5-minute break. And we're just going to do every talk one after the other. We're hoping to finish pretty early today. And then, you know, time for drinks and networking at the end. Cool. So I will begin with my talk. Thank you. Amazing. All right. So I actually had like a much longer talk planned, but then I thought this is kind of more interesting, or at least it's more topical. I can do the other talk some other point. It's not very pressing. But yeah, like, does anybody know what's happened last month? The really big thing that's happened last month with Laravel? Yes. Cloud? Yes, that's it. Well, yes. So essentially, unbelievably, at least to myself, Laravel has raised $57 million. That's not South Pacific pesos, but actual US dollars, meaning that's about 85 million AUD. It's a lot of money. Almost 100 million, all right, 85 million AUD from Excel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Excel, I don't know. Basically, they're a really, really big VC fund in the US, obviously. They invest in many like small tech startups. I mean, many like hundreds. And yeah, like $57 million. That is not a small amount of money, considering Laravel is basically like what, 6, 7 people, something like that. Like that's pretty crazy. Yeah, like I think about Cover Genius raising money, like maybe a similar amount of money. We're a relatively much bigger company. So I can just imagine these guys and their $57 million, man. Whoa, that's a lot of money to spend. All right, so now how's the money going to be used? Yeah, so for those that don't know, this is the lovely Mrs. Taylor Otwell in front of his Lambo, I think, right? Is that right, Ivan? It's not a, yeah. So I don't know, maybe he's gonna buy 10 more Lambos. I'm not sure. If Taylor wasn't already a multi-millionaire, like if you think about this 57 million, that's not how much money Laravel is worth. That's how much money they're raising. The valuation would be like $500 million, maybe $250 million at least, depending on what proportion of their company they're actually selling during the capital raise. But it could be as high as $500 million, could even be higher than that easily. That's again for a framework, an open source framework, open source project that's maybe like a bit more than 10 years old, with a dozen people working for it. Like that's pretty crazy. Anyway, so where's the money going? Yes, they announced this new product called Laravel Cloud at the same time as the capital raise, which was interesting and unexpected, I think, for many people, to say the least. And I thought, well, it's probably a good opportunity to review the Laravel hosting landscape and just see what's happening. And also, obviously, where does Laravel Cloud fit in? So yeah, why is it interesting? Well, we already have two products. Whether they're great or not, I don't know, debatable. There's a really fun friend of ours, Ruben, who's unfortunately not here. I'm sure he'd be laughing at this slide. But yeah, there are two products called Laravel Forge and Laravel Vapor. They already are pretty significant hosting related products, first party products by Laravel. Let's have a look at what they do. So we have Forge. Forge is like a relatively traditional infrastructure as a service. Essentially, it's kind of like an orchestrator. It deploys and manages all of the services. So like, Nginx, FPM, Redis, whatever database you prefer. Well, just MySQL and Postgres, but at least you have that kind of choice. And then the key thing is it supports many different cloud providers, right? So yeah, there's cloud providers, but then there's not cloud providers like what is them, like DigitalOcean or DynaHost or whatever else. There's like a whole list of them. But the point is it supports many different hosting providers, so you have quite a lot of choice. It integrates with your Git provider, so like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. It has some basic kind of logs and server monitoring, nothing crazy, but it has the basics. It has integrations with some opinionated services. Just the reason why I say it's opinionated is obviously there's a lot of competitors in this space. They haven't really aimed to do an integration with every competitor, but they will just usually pick like one or two in each kind of space. And it's surprisingly inexpensive. Like obviously you're still paying for the hosting, just to be clear. So this doesn't provide the hosting, it's just the orchestration. But the cost of it, I think it's like $20 a month or something for the headline plan, the one that they want you to get. So that's not really a lot of money. If you're a developer, you just kind of want to run some Laravel projects. You're not really, you don't have a lot of infrastructure skills, but maybe you still, you want to choose your web hosting solution. Maybe you already have a relationship with the web host. Then this is perfect, right? You can take care of all the orchestration, deployment, updates, all of these things, and you don't really have to worry about much. So it's a very like traditional, very normal solution, very similar to your standard like old LAMP stack. On the other hand, Vapor is a much newer. By the way, this product has been out for quite a while, like I don't know, 8 years or something like that. Can't remember. Maybe even longer. Vapor is a much newer product. I think that's only been out for like 3 years. I want to say 2.5 years. 10 years for Forge. Wow, so it's super old. Which is not a bad thing. It means it's a mature product having many features, right? So Laravel Vapor, that's much newer, and it's very different. It's you can kind of see that it's a newer product in the fact that it's less refined. It has less integrations. It has less features. It's very scrappy. It's actually CLI driven, so Forge has a UI interface where you can kind of control everything. Vapor doesn't. Vapor is CLI driven, so you have to use CLI commands to do pretty much everything. And essentially all it is like AWS Lambda as a service, right? So your code runs on Lambda functions, web requests, jobs, schedule, tasks, everything, which is kind of interesting. Like if you have a very, have an application with very sporadic load, you're not really sure how much infrastructure you need. It's very useful for this kind of use case. But yeah, it is quite restricted in terms of where you can run it. Like it only supports AWS. Of course, both GCP and Azure have their own serverless implementation, so it's not like there's only Lambda. It's just to be clear, yes, there are other things and other cloud providers. And yeah, I think it supports very limited databases as well. So yeah, very few features. Like again, newer product, probably not as much work has gone into it since, but it is very useful for that specific use case. For sure, you can see though it's less refined. So I wanted to have like a slide to compare. Every time. I wanted to have a slide to compare them, but like you can kind of get the sense. More traditional infrastructure, serverless infrastructure, more features, less features. The cost is actually very similar. I think Vapor is maybe $40 or $30, 35. So it's like twice as expensive, but again, we're starting from a very cheap base, so it's not like it's a lot of money to begin with. Basically, both of these tools are very cheap. In both of these cases, you're still paying for the underlying infrastructure as well. So in this case, you're paying for Lambda. Now, okay, so we have these two things. Now, what's Laravel Cloud? Laravel Cloud. It's very interesting. So it's not yet been released, but I think the rumor is they're going to release the public preview at Laracon AU. So that's in 3 weeks, along with some other products. I think those are the rumors. But anyway, at Laravel Cloud, it's more similar to Forge. And it's kind of very interesting because if you look at all the marketing for Forge, they'll for sure emphasize the fact that it's like this really great whiz-bang product that does everything for you. Don't have to do anything. It's really cool. If you look at the marketing for Cloud, at least what's been released now, they're like kind of throwing Forge under the bus, saying, no, that's just like a very basic solution. Don't worry about that. Laravel Cloud will do everything for you. That's the thing that's going to manage everything for you. So that that is already like very interesting because they kind of like they're obviously going to be competing against each other. They're kind of cannibalizing maybe their products a little bit to some extent. But yeah, so Laravel Cloud, the main difference is Laravel itself will have the server infrastructure along with the management tools that you're using, right? So you're no longer using your own web host or AWS, although I think it's pretty clear it's going to be backed by AWS under the hood. But in any case, you don't have your own AWS account or your own accounts with any server provider or relationship or pricing, whatever else. So for example, if you have some volume pricing with AWS, you're not going to be able to make use of it. Although I suspect they're not really targeting big corporates anyway, but yeah, essentially now there's no more middlemen with the hosting providers. Laravel Cloud is everything. It's your infrastructure, it's your management, it's everything. A lot of funny marketing. Again, one of the things they say is it does away with the complexities of managing external provider accounts, external cloud provider accounts. Like, okay, I don't know, I don't see what the complexity is other than paying the bill, but obviously there, it's kind of very funny marketing. Yeah, deploy a new application in 25 seconds. So that means if you're setting up a new project for the first time, that initial deployment will be 25 seconds. I'm not sure how big of a deal this is. Like you're literally only ever going to do it once. It's obviously because they keep some warmed up installations. I don't see it as such a big deal. I don't know why they're marketing this. It's a bit weird. But anyway, I guess maybe if you're in a hackathon and you need like a Laravel install like that, snap, okay, 25 seconds, maybe that's useful. Serverless Postgres, so that's basically AWS, Postgres, Aurora, serverless, whatever it is. Yeah, just a lot of like managed, fast, blah, blah, blah. I think in the Laracon US presentation where they announced it, Taylor Otwell said the word fast 20 times or 30 times or something. So, okay, what does it actually mean? Like, is it actually faster than anything else? I don't know. But anyway, public beta is coming soon. It's coming in 3 weeks potentially. Not to be too negative. So yeah, obviously it's a very fully fledged, fully managed solution compared to Forge. It's a situation where you never have to touch infrastructure. And I guess you probably will not be able to anyway, like you're not gonna have access to it. There's further auto scaling and scaling rules as opposed to Forge where you can kind of configure the resource limits, whereas this will be auto scaling if you want it to be. There will be a single bill to pay instead of multiple bills, obviously. Okay, in my opinion, this is speculation, but I think they're going to combine the serverless functionality from Vapor as well. I think it just kind of makes a lot of sense. And I do suspect, like just from looking at it, I guess it will be fully Kubernetes based under the hood. I'm not sure whether that'll surface itself to users in any way, but it seems like that's what they're using, whereas Forge does not use that as far as I know. And yeah, there will, yes? So I think the new vision for Laravel making it available to somebody who may not have access to products that potentially
after this develop phase, is now able to have web server.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry, I wish I gave you the microphone. Yeah, so the comment is it's going to make it basically lower the barrier to entry for people that might not have a lot of money, might not have a lot of experience with the Linux environment. I think that's very true. It also seems like they're kind of advertising more complex add-on features compared to Forge. So I think they mentioned so far like deep traffic analysis, DDoS protection, like all of these kind of things. I would imagine some of that would be provided, well, probably all of that would be provided by AWS or Cloudflare, but anyway. Yeah, some other kind of, I don't know, hip sounding features like hibernation, which they describe as if nobody's using your app, they're just going to spin it down. It's not going to cost any money, which sounds kind of interesting, I guess. I don't know, questionable. Pricing, we don't know for production what the pricing will be like, but so far they've released this example pricing for sandbox, so like non-production environments. So as you can see, yes, as mentioned, it is very cheap to kind of try it, to get started with it. No monthly fee for sandbox. There will be a monthly fee for production. Compute less than 1 cent an hour. Serverless Postgres 4 cents an hour. Domains for free or subdomains for free, I guess. So yeah, and I guess hibernation, it is very useful. Like if you have an app in development, maybe you don't even have a local environment, right? I guess. Maybe your computer is like very basic. You don't have enough resources to run a local environment. Maybe, I don't know. But for these kind of situations, it's almost like a remote local environment where you can test your application in a real world situation. Okay, so yeah, what else? So already, because it's so obvious, already Taylor said yes, Vapor and especially Forge will continue to be supported and continue to be developed. In fact, they said that they're going to hire extra developers. It'll allow them to work further on Laravel and open source, like adjacent open source projects, which I think is a good thing. Like personally, one of my biggest criticisms of Laravel in the past is that they kind of tend to just clean out packages, just throw shit at the wall and not touch it for like years and years until people start using it a lot, which I think is not great. But so if they have more developers, I think the argument is if they're going to put out a project, they will actually put sufficient resourcing into it to continue to develop it straight away from the get-go without having to kind of test the waters first to see if people actually take it up or not. So I think that's actually really good news. But yeah, oh, one thing I forgot to mention, so Laravel Forge, for those that don't know, you don't have to run Laravel on it. You can also use Symfony. It runs WordPress as well. I think it does Drupal, if I'm not mistaken. So it does a variety of PHP frameworks. Laravel Cloud will only be for Laravel, and that's been made very clear. Maybe in the future they will change that, it's possible, but certainly to begin with, it's just focused on Laravel. So it is a very, very Laravel-focused project. Yeah, in general, of course, Taylor always made sure to say Laravel is already profitable. There's no issues with profitability. So this is just extra resources to hire extra people. And the fact that it will benefit the whole PHP ecosystem, this I definitely do agree with. I think it's a really good broad sign that PHP is a great language, one we love to use, and there's a lot of traction there on the business side of things. One kind of interesting thing, so for example, our company, we have to deal with a lot of regulatory compliance frameworks like SOC 2, GDPR. There's also others like SOC X and others. So they said they're going to look into these for Laravel Cloud, but for sure it's not going to be there at the beginning. Meaning, again, I kind of feel like it's more targeted towards SMEs, individual users. It's definitely not targeted towards big companies, but you can envision that eventually it will be a solution for big corporates as well. Yeah, so obviously, so just I guess to conclude here, it is a more complete and fully rounded solution than Vapor or Forge. It's very likely they're going to take all the functionality that already exists in Vapor or Forge. So I think there will be some cannibalization there. Like they obviously are competing against each other in a certain sense, but I don't think they really care that much because it doesn't really matter which of these products you choose. Either way, Laravel is making the money, right? So I think it is in their best interest to develop all of these products, continue to develop these existing products, that is. It's probably going to have a higher profit margin, I think, for Laravel. And I suspect because they're hiring more people to work on this, and I mean, it's already like pretty much almost ready, right? Because they're already gonna launch it. They're gonna hire a lot more people to work on it, as well as, to do like level 1, 2 support, whatever else. So that's a good thing. One thing I read, I think on Reddit, is there's this company called Vercel. Never heard of it, but apparently it's something in the JavaScript space, which is apparently it's very similar, perhaps, to what Laravel Cloud is aiming to be for the PHP space. So if you're interested, like where is Laravel Cloud going? What's the end goal? Have a look at this. I think it's actually a pretty good example. Has anybody heard of this? Anybody using this? Yeah?
Pre-render a lot of pages. This is one of the ways you use it. So server pages pre-rendered at lightning fast speed, and it's pretty much free to use. So simple site.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are using it. You just give them pretty much your GitHub account and it'll grab the code and render all the pages. Sure, it's lightning fast, but it's blazing fast.
Yeah, so it's lightning fast, but is it blazing fast? Yeah, I guess we'll see. I think like immediately you're gonna see, like, as soon as there's a public beta, there's gonna be people posting about benchmarks of Forge versus Cloud. Unfortunately, it's gonna be difficult to compare because you don't know what the underlying hardware is. But yeah, probably you can compare it at least on the basis of cost. Okay, cool. So yeah, what else is there? Last slide, I think. So is this it? Are these all the options? No, there's other options. You can roll your own setup, of course, like a traditional setup or a Kubernetes setup. Like that's what we do here. You can also just run applications on your home server, right? If you don't need like a crazy reliable production, we do have NBN nowadays. It's not that bad. It's not down all that often. So you can have a home server. It's going to be way more powerful than anything on AWS for anywhere near comparable amount of money. You can use a different managed solution. So there's many managed hosting solutions that probably are not really Laravel focused. So you still have to do a lot of work yourself. Or yeah, if you're a really big company, you can hire an infrastructure team who can do all of this for you, which is why I really feel like this is more targeted towards SMEs, like a startup. They don't have money to hire an infra team yet. So, if they can use something that's way cheaper than hiring infrastructure people, and it also includes the infrastructure cost, well, I think it's a no-brainer. It's just going to make it much easier for companies, for startups especially, to get started with Laravel, which is a good thing, I think, in the long term as well. So yeah, in conclusion, get your hands dirty with the infrastructure or don't. There's plenty of choice, I think, nowadays. And yeah, oh man, I forgot to use my clicker. Does it work? No, it doesn't even work. Never mind. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. And we'll have. Where's Marcelo? Okay. Yeah, come on up. So yeah, we should take a very, very quick, like 4 or 5 minute break, grab another beer, and we'll get started very shortly.
Was rolling our class back in the days. Governor.
All right, I think we better get started. All right, guys, we're gonna get started. Ready? All right, have a seat. Let's get started.
Cheers, man. Hello, hello, hello. As usual. Oh. Yeah, you test and then when you try to do it for real, it fails. Right. So, thank you for having me. I am Marcelo. I will present to you today with a talk on how to build your own Uber app. I worked for a big company back in Brazil called Easy Taxi, then The Iconic, then Offload, and now at Insight. Recently joined last week, so pretty new. Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah, Insight. So just a bit of background on Insight. It's optimizing efficiency through data visualization. They have, well, we have now, I should say, proprietary IoT devices that collect data from the ground through trackers, sensors, and network. So pretty cool stuff. So check it out. We're in the agri space. There's a lot of things and conversations there are wild. So yeah, a little bit on Easy Taxi. So just you have an idea, because it's a Brazilian company, but it was really at its peak present in more than 30 different countries, including South America, all South America, Indonesia, Middle East, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, just to name a few. It was much better than Uber. It was, it doesn't exist anymore. Yes. Think about it like Uber for taxis, like 13 cabs or Ola. So I'm here to tell you how to build your app and then tell a little bit of the story of how we did it. And talking about data visualization, this is essentially, I think, a month worth of travels from different drivers in different cities. And we had this project where we're able to collect all the GPS positions where they have been and light it up as, you know, in black canvas. And surprisingly enough, it ended up drawing the city limits pretty nicely, right? So there's no map involved, it's just data. So it's pretty cool, just to start. So all you need is essentially 3 things. So you need 2 mobile apps, one for the passenger, another one for the driver, and an API. We use Alex at the time, micro framework for APIs, so it doesn't have all the loaded thing for doing UIs, it's just API driven, and the device that collects GPS position. So what are we actually trying to solve, right? So, well, see, the passenger you as a passenger, right? So you're in the street and you're trying to find a driver that's available and that is closer to you, but you actually don't have an easy way of calling them. So it's pretty annoying, right? So that's exactly what you're trying to solve here. So how do you connect those two parties? So essentially, the first piece of the puzzle is to create a driver app. And that's, you create a driver app to address this issue, and you distribute to all drivers in the city. Easy peasy, right? So that's very easy to do. Then you start collecting the GPS position of those drivers. So how does it work, right? So you have the app getting the GPS position. You collect the latitude, which is essentially the x-axis. Then you collect the longitude, which is essentially the y-axis. And then you send back to our server, right? So we store all these positions using MongoDB, which MongoDB is a NoSQL database. Given the structure or nature of the data structure that we were collecting at the time, also, we wanted to leverage speeds because MongoDB was lightning fast, or maybe blazing fast. Yeah, so we collect this on NoSQL database because also multiple different countries, so we had to have different configurations per country. So it made a lot of sense to do this in a NoSQL database. And this is essentially saying, like how do we collect data? And then all you need to do is, if someone needs a ride, actually, sorry, the app as well, the driver needs to know if someone needs a ride, right? So, and the way for them to know if someone is looking for a ride at that moment is using a technique called HTTP polling, right? So essentially, every 15 seconds, you go to the server and ask, right? Do we have a ride? Is there anyone that needs a ride? And together with that information, every 15 seconds, you would also send in the headers as extra information the GPS position, so you know where that request is coming from. So essentially what you have, it's something like this in your database, right? So that's how your database looks like. And then the driver is called back again 15 seconds later, and then you have another snapshot of the database that they will look like this 15 seconds later. And then since we actually don't care much about the previous positions where they were, because they're not there anymore, we use a command from MongoDB called upsert that will replace or insert a position of the driver in the database if it's not present. Pretty simple. So that it's essentially it for the driver app, right? So you need the polling and you need to know the positions. Now we go into the passenger app. And so you need to have a way for that passenger to call those drivers. And that's our beautiful passenger app on one of the latest versions. Many features packed there. So yeah, why not creating another app and then have every customer to install in the city? Pretty easy job. And then they press a button, the drivers pop up. And the way that you do that, it's very similar technique, right? So that's why it's a repeated slide here. That app also gets the latitude, the longitude, sent to our API saying, hey, I want to ride in this location. Please send me one. But now the brain, the API needs to actually find a way of searching for the drivers, which is the most suitable one. So similar. So how do we actually, search for a driver? So this is, what the passenger app would see all the drivers. We had different icons that we would use. That was an Star Wars event, so we would push releases to have different icons, which was pretty fun. But then how to do that? Right, so your database now, your situation now is looking a bit different, right? So you have all the drivers positions, and then you have a special one now that is the passenger position. And then you wanna search for which ones are closer to that red dot. So then back to our geometry class. The easiest way to find all the points equidistant to the origin is to define a radius from the passenger in the middle, trace a circumference, then find if the other points are inside that circle, the passenger in the middle, right? So you define the radius, press this. Oh man, I panicked, right? So I don't even know where to start or remember how to do that. So that's where Mongoose comes in, right? So Mongoose and its geospatial query system actually does it really easy for you, right? So we have a collection, Mongo would call it collection, also known as tables. So a collection of positions, and you essentially say to that query to locate in that collection any other points that are near to this location. You set the maximum distance, which is the radius that you want, and then any other extra criteria as well, like types of drivers, right? So you have Uber Black, for instance, right? So then you limit that search and other criteria that you can add there. And that's it, right? So then you get easily all the points, all the positions, or essentially all the drivers that are close to that passenger. So let's call this our strategy. So we used to call like a straight distance strategy. So just advance a bit. Straight distance strategy, because it gives us, when I get the result of this query, it will give us the distance to that point in a straight distance, right? So that's the simplest strategy that we can do to find suitable drivers. And then it will give you a result like this, where you have the distance and then it's sorted by distance, the closest one, and then you can store that information in another collection where when the driver requests the server, right, is there any ride? So if he is in that list, then you send the ride to that driver in the response. So now, while the passenger, the API is calculating all this, the passenger app goes into this polling mode, right? So it keeps asking the server, do you already have driver, right? Did you find a driver? Find a driver for me. Is it ready yet? But then we keep this searching for a driver, or we time out essentially, because we cannot keep searching forever. And that's it, right? So that's essentially what you need to create, like all the main elements of this app. So from here on, it's not quite, so there's a lot more, but it's not super structured, but I was planning to just give you a little bit of overview of some real world issues that we face. And to see how are we on time? Am I rushing too fast? Yeah, good. So if we have time, then we go into this. Cool. So in this process where the passenger is trying, the time is of essence, right? So so getting back to our straight line strategy, offer strategy, straight distance offer strategy. So we haven't defined the value of R before, and then clearly, of course, the best value is closer to 0, right? But then closer to 0 might give you a result of 0 drivers. And then if you go too big, then you get drivers that are super far away from the passengers, right? So, which is not a good experience because they're too far. So we figure out that this also varies a lot along the day. And in rush hours, a bigger radius might result into many drivers, right? So you put it big, it's super packed, so you get a lot of drivers. And then alarming and then sending requests to 100 drivers, for instance, will annoy everyone because they only have 1% of chance to get that right? So only one driver can accept. So this impacts how the passenger and the driver perceive our platform. So we have to play with those KPIs all the time: acceptance rate, how many drivers we are actually offering to, how many rides the driver can actually accept, so they can actually feel that you have a platform that is good. So the solution for that problem was essentially having a function that takes into account the day of the week, because every day is different, and then there's a behavior that is different in the city. The time of the day would also make a difference, right? Overnight, it's very different than like a normal working hours. And the distance and the ETA, which is estimated time to arrival, and the quantity of the drivers available is also taken into account. And then we created an algorithm that was called progressive radius, right? So it works like this: you set a maximum radius, like the biggest one you think you need to get to cover that city or that region, and then we check for tiers. So we create tiers, and then we first do, can't see the tiers, right? So you first do send a message to the drivers that are in the first tier. If there is none driver, you immediately go to tier 2, and then you wait a bit, right? So you give it a couple of seconds. You don't have much time. Again, it's of essence. No one accepted, you extend to the next one, so on and so forth. And to do that, we end up storing this configuration, right? So lead time, distance, the time that was valid for the weekday, that was valid for so on and so forth. So let's look into another situation, right? So another problem, or another challenge, I'd say. There is this driver. So it turns out that straight distance offer strategy, it's sometimes inefficient. I hope you can see it here. So imagine that driver 1 looks closer to passenger, right? But actually, in reality, driver 2 has actually a better route to get to that passenger fast, right? Or faster, right? So then your straight distance algorithm essentially failed. So we are forced to create a different algorithm that is based on the route, right? So we would call it like route-based strategy. But this is not something that you can get out of MongoDB. It takes a lot more time to calculate the routes for every single point that you have. And every second that you spend doing calculations throughout this process, it's time that the client and the passenger is waiting for the driver to be assigned to him, right? So not taking into account for how long the driver will have to take to them. So we compromise. We combine the straight distance algorithm. We do a limit. We get a limit that is reasonable, that has more chances to get to that passenger. And then with that limited database, or data set, we then do a calculation using Google Maps or here Maps. Now I think they're called. I think before they're called Nokia or something. So this is an isoline that is distance-based, right? So essentially, any point on the boundaries take the same distance to get to the middle one, right? So en route, right? Trying to figure out the routes in the city. But you know, life is full of surprises. On rush hours, this doesn't work well.
How did you work this out?
This you do, it's another query. You send, there is an API. You send a query, you say, this is my middle point. This is my distance. What is the area that you actually have in route distance? That's Google or Here Maps. Both offer this option. Here Maps, here, yeah. So rush hours, this wouldn't work well. Then we were forced to move into another strategy, which is like an ETA-based strategy, based on traffic, on time to arrival to the client. And then you can see that the shape of it's the same parameters, but the shape of the area changed completely, right? So you're not going more straight lines. It's not days, it's actually how long it takes for anyone inside that area to take to get to that point in the middle, based on traffic and time, right? So whatever it's inside is taking less than the maximum time that you defined. And then we initially thought that you know, drivers would, like, the first driver to accept is actually the one that takes the wins, right? So it takes it. But remember the polling strategy or technique, right? So it takes 15 seconds for you to, for a driver app to notice that there is a ride. So that will then get the drivers to find a better mobile phone, so they could, you know, have a fast phone, better 4G network. At that time, they were like even paying more to get 4G because more, like, as faster your internet is, the better you get the data. But still, you would have gaps. So we would send a ride for you, but then the other app is still in polling, right? So it would take 15 seconds. So you accept, then when it gets to him, it's gone, right? So we end up using, and then drivers got really annoyed. So they come up with this solution. So we had, I don't have the icon here because I got the, you can see here you have accept and reject, right? So at some point we added the reject point. And at some point in time, that's a newer version, but the accept button, it was like a big button in the middle, right? So the mobile device would go into background, so essentially closed, right? So it will be off. They'll put the rubber band, and then whenever we bring the app back to front, to forefront, it would just click automatically. So we had a lot of issues of driver automatically accepting, and then they would think, oh, now I can cancel, right? So, and then that's another KPI we had to look for, you know, like how many drivers are actually canceling, and that's why you see penalties on Uber, etc., because it is a behavior that happens. So it's actually a very interesting technology, I think. I'm not super up to date into this, but we use PubNub to solve for those issues. So PubNub, it's a published subscriber network, so they have infrastructure across multiple countries. And they essentially are an event-based, event-driven platform, right? So you get an SDK, your app connects to PubNub, and essentially opens a WebSocket that's prior to HTTP2, right? So I think you can do that, achieve that with HTTP2 nowadays, but it's still, they have distribution, right? So they have a network. So then instead of the driver polling, we would then push the information to that app. And that would reduce, like, whenever we have a ride for driver from 15 to 2 seconds, right? So that made things much better. And of course, we changed the UI so they could avoid of doing this. But if you could think, maybe you remove or you change the polling time to be a shorter one. But if you do change from 15 to 5, you essentially create a DDoS on yourself, right? So you if you have, we had 50,000 drivers send a request every single minute. So in an average, that's because they have every 15 seconds. So if you reduce that, then you double, triple, quadruple that, and that kills your server, right? So it requires more servers for you to process. So we call those guys fast fingers, right? Because they would just accept. But then at some point we realized that this was also not a super reliable option, because drivers is not usually the first one that accepts that is the best one to get that right. Sometimes they're not super close. Sometimes it took a long while for the closest one to accept. Then we come up with this auction strategy, right? So which would allow more time for drivers to be able to accept. But that I will let you to imagine how you can actually achieve that algorithm. But that's it. Thank you. Questions?
Said your company was better than Uber, right? So
Yes. What happened? Cool. History. Uber entered the Brazilian market, which was one of the biggest ones for us, also South America. So we were first players in some, second player in other markets. Uber entered, and we had to push and then change processes and then innovate and then be the best app and then go private. We entered into private cars as well, private drivers, to essentially offer the same thing. And then we pushed the taxi drivers to actually lower the cost as well. And we had internal conflicts of raising funds and being acquired. So we were supposed to be acquired by Didi, but that was the C-levels blow out that deal. We end up being acquired by Cabify, which is a Spanish company. And they essentially replaced the app, release, and they screwed it up. They thought that the technology was better. And I've been talking to the team after that, and then they say like, "Oh, our technology is much better," but they actually don't know how to deal with that. And then usually the company that acquires comes and then raises everything. Yeah, and they exit the market, so they end up failing, and then they're not there anymore. So the company is dead, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's why I can show you everything, because no one will chase me.
So, thank you for your presentation. As a language, have you faced any challenges using PHP as the main programming language for this kind of project?
Yeah. So the question is again, right? So on PHP, is PHP a good language for this? Is there any challenges on this? I have to say that PHP is a great language, because we were using PHP 5 at that time, and then we upgraded to PHP 7, and it was super fast, right? So we had response times with Mongo as well, and usually you have issues in the database. The database starts being slower than your code, but then again, your code matters, right? No matter what language it is, your code matters. So yeah, we've been super, especially we had APM everywhere, so we would know which requests or transactions are taking longer. Focus on that, and then optimize those, and then try to take out any single bit that we could from that code to speed up the process. Putting database in memory to speed up how long we would write the data. But then, of course, you have to think about the use case. You can't use any solution for different use case, right? So anything that's drawbacks. But no, PHP is great and fast. Woo! What payment gateway we were using? So we're using Adyen. I don't know how to pronounce Adyen. Yeah. Adyen, it was the main one. But very interestingly, right? So on the taxi driver, we had, and then Uber pushing us, we had to create our own taximeter. So we had to calculate everything offline in the app. We would have to do offline payments. So when you leave the Uber and then you shut the door, you don't care, right? So before we were like, oh, you have to end the ride, you have to wait for the payment to process, and then when it's okay, the taxi driver can let you go. There was a lot of trust issues, but then when Uber entered, it was like, oh, Uber is not like that. Uber is seamless, so you don't care. So yeah, we had to create all this whole thing of offline payment, which means that payments wouldn't be processed immediately. So we had to do pre-approvals and then trust and then keep trying, and you have network issues that the app might not connect to you for a long while. The driver might log off for the day, and then when it logs back, you have to catch up with all the processes, all the payments, and then reprocess, and then reconcile, and then make sure that you pay for all the rides that you, because you have the rides, you just don't have the payment data, have to reconcile and then figure out. So it's a big, and then you go into fraud detection, there's the whole thing. Cool.
Which other technologies have you used for this? Regarding the
Cool. So which technologies, what was tech stack essentially, but in detail. So we use LAMP, right? So LAMP architecture. Excuse me. So Nginx for sure, AWS with auto-scaling EC2s at the time. The apps had to be native, so Android and Swift, I think, at that time. What else? Database MongoDB, mostly, especially for sharding across different regions. And how does it call? So you have replicas, right? So you can't do that really easy on PHP. So replica sets, it's much easier to deal with MongoDB. So you could have 3 replicas and then they would fail over. If someone fails, then the right authority would go to the other database. So you would always have these redundancies. And MySQL as well, when we were doing payments, we wanted something more transactional. Postgres was not in our radar at that time, unfortunately, so we used MySQL. What else? I think that's mostly it. And then service providers, SDK from external APIs. Cool. Cool, yes. Thank you.
All right, one more speaker. Again, very quick break. Very quick break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again. You want a quicker?
No.
Charge?
Made a screen share, like not a slide share.
Just, yeah, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, it's like you are called. I can answer any questions.
That's all right. Oh, yeah, sure.
Send me in WhatsApp maybe.
It wasn't like.
Oh, actually, yeah, I know.
I said, yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, grab a beer, have a seat. We'll start very shortly. Oh my God. Oh, that's fine. As long as you wanted to restrict. No, whatever you like. Yeah. It's up to you. Alrighty, we have the man, the myth, the legend.
Woo!
All right, let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome to my talk. So my name is Mith.
Ignore me, just keep going, keep going.
Yep. So the motivation for this talk is basically very recently. In our team, we were talking about making an integration with another service internally in the company. So the service basically provides REST API service, and it's a very small service basically. So there are like four endpoints that we need to consume to like use that service in our app. And well, just talking about it, we found out that the service might be used by some other PHP team. So it would be nice to have some sort of wrapper. So SDK came in mind. So let's basically just build an SDK, and then any other PHP team, any other PHP product that want to use that particular service, they can just use it, and then over time we can extend it. And while doing that, while making that decision, I try to do some research on my side. Obviously, like we have some SDK already in our app, but then just thought like what's going on in the ecosystem at the moment, and like what people are doing, what people are suggesting, or things like that, best practice and things like that. So basically just from that discussion, and after what the decision that we made, I thought maybe I'll just share some experience with that, like why we chose one solution over another. Yeah, so that's what this is about. So I thought it was a very small service. We didn't want to spend too much time in it. What would be a very like easy and lightweighted but still efficient way to build SDK. There is a disclaimer. We ended up doing something that we have been doing already in our app. Basically, we just thought that was like to do something very quick. That was basically something that has been working on production for like over 5 years time. It's still fine, but I will try to share some other strategies that could have been we could have chose. And the other disclaimer is this talk is not anything that I wanted to present. I wanted to spend more time, but it's just like had some personal life commitments, so I couldn't spend enough time in it. Like code sample and like the presentation. So the presentation is very like bare minimum, but I'll talk you guys through it. Yeah. So what is SDK? SDK is basically so what we're going to talk about in here, why SDK, some key considerations and implementation details. Yeah, so I'm sure like you guys know what an SDK is, but just going to go through it. So software development kit. It's basically some toolkit that you can like developers use to interact with your service, and you just give a gateway, so to speak, for the others to consume your app, and then like the developer wanted to have a very easy user experience or developer experience to integrate your service to their like the consumer app or consumer service. And we were like talking about like what are the things we should just like quickly, what are the things we should be like caring about. So obviously developer experience, because developer would be the user who are going to use this app and use this SDK. We wanted to make the solution like as flexible as possible for the consumer, so that slightly different type of app I can still find the implementation of this SDK easy. If possible, some sort of configurability, a little bit more on that a little bit later. Obviously, some documentation for the consumer so that like they can find like what's in scope with this SDK. Like what to expect, how to use it, how to like get started very, very quickly. And obviously some unit tests. Is like, to me, SDK is a very thin layer between like your app talking to the other app. So the main thing that you want to care about is like the connection is working fine, the way you are like setting up your clients, the client like setup is correct and things like that. So just like those sort of tests as a bare minimum, I guess. And obviously, like there is a lot of talks about like PSR standards on the web. Obviously, like these are for good reasons, right? So, like you want to build something that like interoperable with the like different type of client choices, and then you want to make sure that like when you are building your app, the way you are making the request, you're accepting the response, like works like seamlessly. So like these standards are talking about like that. So like with the HTTP clients, like there are 3 PSR that are really like talking about like these things. So PSR 17, PSR 18, PSR 7. Like they're basically just talking about the whole ecosystem of the HTTP, like HTTP clients area. Yeah, so just very briefly, PSR 18 basically talks about the HTTP client interface. PSR 7 defines the interface for the HTTP messages, and 17 is basically just like the HTTP message like factories and things like that. Yeah, so like with these in mind, when I was like doing the research, just came up with like these are the things I wanted to like build some sample app, but just couldn't get some time for it. But like something I came up like over and over on the web is like this HTTP plug library for the developers, and it's basically saying if you are building a library for or a framework that performs HTTP requests, you should not use should not be dependent on the concrete HTTP client libraries, things like Guzzle. Instead, you should be like making things like so that any HTTP clients like can like use it. And then here's a very brief example of like what are the things will end up like you will end up importing as a like dependency for the package. And here's a very simple code sample they presented. So here you can see that like so you basically pass like basically accept some interface for the HTTP client. So with this, it's basically like going to discover which kind of like HTTP client you passed on, a message factory discovery class, and then you build up this request with that message factory. And then with this, basically this HTTP response would be, you will be able to basically use in any framework, so that like framework, like if the framework is like following the standards, then like you will basically very much work with like the request response classes that provides. This is like very messy. And then in the implementations, I guess you'll probably like build like each of these requests as some sort of easily consumable API. Or zoom out. Sorry. Better? Yeah, so like these bits would be each of those basically methods that defines your service, each of the endpoints. And leave it here. But then like the solution that we have been using in our like production app like for a really long time, I think we had at least like 2 SDKs that uses Guzzle. I know there are like a love and hate relationship with Guzzle so for many people, but it still works, right? So there is an implementation in our app like with the Guzzle services, and then it has this description object. So you basically define all the operations here. So like basically this is like just a sample endpoint or like operation testing, and then it accepts get request on this URL, and like if it's like accepting new parameters, so you define here like how it responds has a like defined through the model. So you basically just define that model here. One thing though, so like this example is showing Guzzle client, which is not like PSR 18 compliant. But like Guzzle client basically just use the Guzzle command struct, like Guzzle command constructs, and then just yeah, we'll response off of it. So like with this description definition, like super simple, right? So you have this client here, you are like building a description, like you define all your services here, and like whatever services you want to expose, and then you just new a Guzzle client, and with a Guzzle client, whatever operations you're like have defined here, you just call it with the parameters. So that's it. So PSR 18 basically asks you to like call like some specific like functions that is defined in the interface, right? So like request interface has like make request or send request function that needs to be there through the interface, but then Guzzle client basically works with the Guzzle command like classes. So it uses curl. So with a how do we say it? Command construct, let's say, for example. So it uses curl, and then like it just like calls like curl get, and then the like the endpoints and everything else. So it's just basically 2 different like the implementation details really. It just like helps you to like, you know, once you're implementing with the interfaces, you basically can guarantee that like some of the implementations are there, so you can like you don't break your app when you're like making your frameworks and libraries and things like that. So yeah, nothing really wrong. Yeah, but like that's also my point, right? Yeah. Yeah, so just wanted to like go through another example here. So this is basically just the Guzzle like Guzzle package. Like it talks about like you could also use the Guzzle client class to basically just build the PSR like 18 standard request factory. I was like, even though I couldn't like do what I wanted to show, but then I was able to just pull off like some sample code here. So this is just yeah. This is just a normal Laravel app. in the web route, I have this. So I thought like I'll just like build up some API SDK for CoinGecko, the cryptocurrency website. So they have like free API service. So just wanted to show like 2 endpoints and like the implementations of it. Yeah, so I'm getting an instance of the CoinGecko class to the service container, and then I have some implementations for the ping method and like the ping endpoint, and then the sample price endpoint. So if I go in here, super simple implementation. So I have a service provider because it's a Laravel app. Yeah, I have a singleton where I'm new up, like making an instance of that CoinGecko, and then all I have to pass is the base URL and token. In that create method, basically I have like all these like default configurations, and it has, so like with the Gazelle client, like you could create and stack, and then like basically just push different like middleware into it. So in this case, I just need to I just need to have an implementation of the authorization middleware. So it's just like pushing an header with the authorization and the token in it. So I'm newing up this client. So this client is the Gazelle HTTP client, which is that like PSR 18 compliant. So in the Gazelle services example, it was showing Gazelle client, slightly different. So I'll just go back. Yeah, so these are different implementations here. So you can basically use interchangeably both. And I'm just getting that description from the that description class. So here I have a couple of endpoints. So this endpoint is basically like ping, and then the other more is like sample price. This is just giving you back some like dummy text, and another one you could pass like the coin ID and the currency that you want to check the price for. And here, like the response model, you could like define your own model, how it needs to be parsed. And now, once I'm on the app, so this is the web route. Yeah, it just gives you Gecko says to the moon. Another example. So I'm basically just passing Bitcoin with USD price. Yeah, just that. Yeah, as you can see that I'm just like, so this, so like, oops, yeah. So, no. So just the point that I just wanted to make that like, so once you have the response coming out of it, you just like have like an easy way to parse, and then like this response class in your framework of choice, you could basically pass to the response object, and then it will be able to parse like however you'd like to for your app. Yeah, so like the point I wanted to make is like, even though like there has been like lots of talk about like all these like different implementations trying to make it like really flexible, when it's an app that you're like, it's an internal like service to service communication, don't really need to make it like too complicated. Like very simple. There are like very simple implementations available, but like there are times when you're like building like this kind of SDK like plugins, or like SDK for like big apps. So let's say you're making an SDK for the AWS services, probably have to think about it, because like lots of people will be using with a lot of like use cases, or like you're like, let's say you are making an app, so like just from Marcelo's app. So if this was like an Uber type application, chances are people are like using it from all over the world. So like you have to consider like maybe like different frameworks, different PHP versions and things like that they're using. So probably like need to consider that in those cases, you have to consider that like how configurable you want to make. But like any app that like you basically have a basically know that ecosystem, what apps are using it, like how you're going to use it. Yeah, don't need to complicate it. And like, yeah, so like this is working very much like fine in our app, like in production, like over 5-6 years. I think we have few services like talking to each other internally, and at least like we have like 2-3 SDKs like that has like these kind of implementations here. So yeah, so that's really it. So just wanted to like basically just at the end of the discussion, what came up is like, yeah, so like if like the new developers that are not aware of like this Google service, Gazelle services, this is a really neat and simple solution. If you just need to wipe up something like very quick SDK. But at the end, like on the other hand, like if you are like building something that like that's gonna be consumed like for different communities or different user or for different apps, yeah, so you could just consider making it like with all these flexibilities, really. Yeah, so that's very much it. Any questions? Yep. Yes. Yeah, so in my Laravel app, that's basically exactly what I did in my Laravel app. So here you'll see another implementation. So I was basically just playing with another implementation where I could like pass on without Gazelle client, but like some other implementation of the client I could like pass on. So couldn't finish it, so didn't want to share. But like this is in my local. Yeah, so it's just like sits next to the next directory in my local. So I added this, but if it was a like PHP package like sitting on the web, you could just like pull in through this. Okay, sure.
Or just enable it.
Yeah.
Guzzle services is different from Guzzle because it's a different way of
No, it's the first party still. So all the PSR standards came long after, right? So it has been there for a while. Yeah, so I think like different like there are like at least like 2 types of implementations or 3 types of implementations in the Gazelle side. So with the Gazelle commands, like that's the implementation. But like on the other hand, yeah, so like basically just the HTTP client has like anything that to do with like HTTP client interface can be implemented. Sorry, has that answered your question? Is it can be implemented through the pulled through the composer? Yeah. So yeah, you can. So it's just like any other package. So this is the package in my composer. I just have like this, and then once I have once I have a Git commit, like the first commit, I would be able to like pull in. You could also like provide a service provider, which you'd be able to pull in your Laravel app if you want to. So you're basically just like giving an example implementations already for the consumer. Yeah, so it's just like one class, has like sort of everything. Yeah, any other questions?
Yep.
All right, I think we can stop the recording.